Oxford from the inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth.
Hi, I'm JPI. Welcome to the latest episode of Oxford from the Inside. Good, the bad, but always the truth. Today we're joined by the wonderful Jessie Chung. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie Chung, and I'm a final year law student currently studying at UCL. I'm originally from Canada, so I'm an international student. And today I'm here to share my story about OCD mainly, but also about other mental health issues and how it might affect students, like especially in lockdown, like how to manage stress and mental health in university. So lots of things.
Yeah, so as you summarised there, this podcast will be on maintaining good mental health, especially when studying at home, in lockdown, some of the stigma around mental health, which I think is still prevalent today. There's an emphasis on OCD, but there will be other mental health conditions covered and the misconceptions surrounding what they are and how they can impact a student's daily life. So just to kick off the questions, I guess, it's great to have you on. I have huge respect for what you've been through and how you are going through your student life right now. So I think you're a great guest to have on this
Yeah,
podcast.
thank you so much.
Right. So what were the initial thoughts that kickstarted your journey to being an OCD activist?
So this was actually so far, like where I am right now is actually so far from where I was originally, because originally I didn't even know that I had OCD. And that was when I was 15. Like I basically, for 2 years, I didn't know I had OCD. So I was kind of like living in the dark, basically. I didn't know what my intrusive thoughts meant. And I just thought I was a bad person. And like I would feel guilty around everyone, like my family and friends. I would distance myself from them because I thought like I was a bad person and I should like not hurt other people. So that was 2 years. And then after like I self-diagnosed myself. So I felt less guilty, but I still felt guilty for like hiding this big secret that I had OCD. And then that was like really hard whenever I would like make a new friend or even with like my existing friends. Like I would always worry I'm hiding the secret that I have OCD. And it's like my deepest, darkest secret. So that was definitely a really far point away from actually being an OCD activist. I gradually started to tell people like one by one, and each time it was really scary. Sometimes I would just like break down crying when I'd have to tell someone, but it got better, and eventually I told everyone on social media about my mental health. That was not really a great time because it was during my manic episode, like because I have bipolar. But after that, like nearly 2 years, like a year and a half, I decided, hey, like being a mental health activist, being an OCD activist is something I've always really wanted to do. And now it feels like the right time. So yeah, like I just decided to start it like last September. It's been so cool. I've met so many amazing people from all around the world who are passionate about the same thing. And I've gained like over 2,000 followers right now. And like, it's really, really great to have so many people know about this.
I think you've not only gained followers, but you've also gained such strong mental resilience. I mean, to go through what you went through to come out the other end of it now and to be an activist,
Yeah.
that's so impressive and also says a lot about you. I mean, I have no words.
Followers are just the icing on top, but no, it's good to know that it's reaching a lot of people.
So on that topic, how would you define OCD and why do you think it's important to understand what it is?
So I don't know how many people actually know what OCD is, because I know that like let's say a few years ago, like obviously everyone thought it was just like hand washing, like opening and closing doors, like that's what people thought. Like now that I'm on this platform and I'm like actually into OCD advocacy and I'm like on this like whole platform where I'm meeting all these OCD activists, even people that don't have OCD, like people actually seem to know more what it's about. Maybe it's just that community, but yeah, so I guess like for people that might not be in that community, like in the general public, um OCD is like not just hand washing, it's not just opening and closing doors, and for many people it can involve intrusive and unwanted thoughts. So like the subset of OCD I have, which is it's not medical, it's not clinical, but it's a colloquial term, and it is called pure OCD. So that basically deals with intrusive, violent, unwanted thoughts, and these thoughts cause the person like severe anxiety. They cause the person to actually like think that they're a bad person, which is what happened with me. And this is all like something that the person can't really distinguish from reality. So that would just be pure OCD, but none of these thoughts are true. It's just how people process the thoughts differently. For example, like anyone could have an intrusive thought about whether they could, for example, like I don't know, kill someone. And like most people would just dismiss that as a passing thought. Like they would know that it's nonsense and they wouldn't give any meaning to it. But people with OCD would start thinking like, oh, the fact that I had this thought must mean I'm a bad person. And then they would obsess in many cases, like many years even. Like people with OCD can go like average, I think I've read 17 years without being diagnosed, which is a really long time. I've only had to go through 3 years of that, but that's pure OCD, which is what I really want to raise awareness about. But of course, OCD can have like, it's not limited to a single theme. It can change themes. There are so many different themes. There's pure OCD involving a lot of taboo themes that you can think of. There's like magical thinking OCD, thinking that if you don't like perform something in a certain way, you don't do something in a certain way, or you don't do your compulsions, like something bad will happen. Or there's like counting OCD, like obviously like contamination OCD, all sorts of these rituals, relationship OCD. It's really even when you're watching, for example, a show, and or you see someone that was a victim of a crime on the news, and your OCD might say something like, that person deserved to die. But that's just a passing intrusive thought. But it just interferes with every part of your life, and it can cause you to really obsess. So it's really hard to define OCD because there is like absolutely no limit to what things it can target. It just targets things that are important to you. And yeah, like that's why OCD is different for everyone and why it's not something that can be really defined or quantified just like that.
I think what you say is totally true. Also, when you take the perspective of just because you're not normal means you have to have some sort of label. And actually, what normal is anymore is breaking down. People have all sorts of thoughts. Just because they have one thought that another person may not like doesn't mean they should be labeled as such. So I think it is just it's very, very hard to define.
And exactly, like everyone has intrusive thoughts. Like that's something that anyone with OCD should know, that like 9 out of 10 people have them. And that having intrusive thoughts like doesn't make you a bad person. Again, it's just like how our brains work differently. It doesn't mean that we have to label each other or say like this person is normal, this person isn't, but it's just like brains work differently, people work differently, and that's just how it goes.
Also, I hate the word normal because what is normal anymore?
Yeah.
Right. How do you think students' working environments have changed over the lockdown period? What do you think this impact has been on students' mental health?
So I think like definitely lockdown and distance remote learning has changed working environments a lot, especially for students, because let's say there's like students that are going through mental health issues, students who aren't. And for students that are going through mental health issues, like let's say like OCD or depression and anxiety, then being in lockdown would mean that that's a lot of self-studying, that's a lot of time alone that you wouldn't be spending with like your friends, your peers, your classmates, just a lot of time alone. And that means that that's a lot of time with your brain and your thoughts. And a lot of people might feel like they're left with nothing but their thoughts. And that's kind of how I felt like. That's kind of how I feel like during lockdown. I'm kind of scared because like I don't know when my thoughts will sort of attack me, and having to do all this self-studying is kind of a struggle because like depression and anxiety makes it hard for you to concentrate, and like suffering from those as well. It's taken a lot of self-discipline to overcome that and to be able to manage my own studies on my own without as much university support. And even for students without any mental health conditions, like it can still be really hard to manage because mental health and mental illness are really different things. And mental health doesn't just mean not having a mental illness. It means like having good mental health and being happy, enjoying life. And all of these things can be hard. Students' mental health can worsen during lockdown, during isolation, and people can even develop like situational depression or anxiety.
So I think you touched on it there, but what has your experience been of the university workload, stress, and mental health?
So it's actually been really hard for me. In the first 2 years of my uni, I got a 2.2 in both years. That was because of my mental health, because I had like OCD, depression, anxiety, and like a bunch of other things that weren't diagnosed in first year. So basically first year, I didn't get any mitigations. I didn't get any extenuating circumstances or anything like that. So my grades were really low. Second year, like both first and second years, like honestly, I could not attend any classes. Like I could not even get out of bed to sit at my desk. And when I did sit at my desk, like I just couldn't focus. So I couldn't study. Like I was really, really good in high school. And I know like none of that reflected like my intellect or like my academic ability or any of that. But it was just like my mental illness. Even after like I got diagnosed and I got mitigations at uni and everything, I guess like they didn't really account for how bad my condition really was, because I had a manic episode at the end of my second year because of my bipolar, and I had to take a year off because of that. So the workload was actually like really, really hard in first and second years, but it's all about just like reaching out to your university because they're much more understanding than you think they are. And I've honestly gotten so much support from my university in terms of finding, like a psychologist, in terms of student support and well-being, in terms of just providing mitigations and helping me in whatever way they can. So I guess my advice would be not to lose hope and not to be afraid to reach out to your university, because no one's going to go and criticize you or anything like that. And this year I'm predicted at first, so that's a really, really huge improvement. It's all because of my university, because of finding the right medication, and of course it's a lot of self-will and just the will to push forward.
Such an amazing turnaround. I really do hope you get that first. I think you can do it. And you're right about talking to universities, and part of the decision process that I made in taking a year off, I'm on a kind of what we call a rustication colloquially in Oxford, is taking time off from university. But I only managed to get through that process by talking to my university tutor and my senior tutor and deciding that was the best thing for me. So yes, I think there is some mental health support, but probably not as much now because students are not on campus. They have to do these counselling sessions remotely or ask for help over email, which is slightly harder than going to see someone in person.
In first and second years, it was so hard for me to just send an email and then like reaching out directly and like having to even go through that process of like going out to like find someone to help you. Like that takes so much courage, and like definitely with like it's really hard to do that, and definitely more so with like distance learning.
Distance learning leads me nicely on to the next question. Do you think it's been harder to adapt to university lifestyle from home as an international student?
I would say so, because obviously it's hard for any international student to adapt to like a country that's entirely foreign to them. They've never lived or studied in. But for me, like it was really hard because like when I went to university, I hadn't even been diagnosed yet with any of my mental illnesses, and I still had OCD. I still thought I was crazy, basically. And I remember like the last night that I was with my family in London, that I was really, really scared of being left alone for the entire year, because I was scared that my thoughts would just like overwhelm me and I would do something stupid. I could not bear the thought of just being alone with that. But it was that night that I actually found an article that by a doctor who I say saved my life. And he really did that because he let me know. The article talked about what pure OCD is. And that's when I realized like that I'm not crazy. And then going to uni, like even though I knew I had OCD, but there were still like so many mental health conditions I hadn't been diagnosed with, hadn't been formally diagnosed. And it was harder because being away from my family, like my family being my core support system, yeah, like that was really hard because there was no one to like unconditionally support me, no one to help me find like medical or clinical support or anything like that. My friends at the time, like they didn't really know that I had this, because again, like I felt guilty. I didn't want to tell them about it, like the struggles of being an international student, like being so young, like 17, 18, 19, and like having to be away from your family, like manage everything on your own. And I remember at the beginning, like the banks and like everything else was a nightmare.
I mean, yeah, I know that the bank system is tough for me as a home student, so I can't imagine what extra hurdles it is for an international student.
Yeah.
But you make a very valid point there about it being hard for international students, just regardless of where they come from. Every system is going to be different in the UK, so just trying to get your way through even the simplest of how to pay your bills is going to be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you share any of your methods or resources that you've used to promote a good mental health?
Is there anything specific? Because like, I mean, I've got a lot of diagnoses, so I don't know. But I'm probably most familiar with OCD, so I'll give a few like OCD.
So maybe some OCD advice, maybe some generic general mental health advice, like how you would promote a good mental health well-being or a good mental health balance for people that study, like stuck at home.
Okay, so OCD specific tips is first one, dealing with intrusive thoughts, whether it's like pure OCD or not pure OCD, whether it's like hand washing or intrusive thoughts or anything like that. Really, like my motto that I like, original quote by me actually, is let your thoughts perpetuate but not dominate. And that basically means like when you have an intrusive thought or an unwanted thought, allow the thought to be there, accept that the thought is there, acknowledge that it's uncomfortable and it's making you feel all these unwanted things and you want to get rid of it, but the key is not to react to it. So the key is just to let the thought be there, but at the same time, like not to have a reaction to it. And that's a really fine balance, because like to what extent do you let the thought be there and just sit there, and to what extent do you let it consume your life? But like it's just, the key is just like, I don't know, like you could see it as like a screen door, and then there's like flies outside of the screen door. You're inside the house and then you see all these flies. So you don't open the actual glass door, but you have a screen door there, and then there you can see all the flies, which are all your intrusive thoughts, but they're not going in and you're not reacting to them, if that makes any sense. But that's just something that I thought of over the summer, along with my motto, let your thoughts perpetuate but not dominate. And just not to suppress your thoughts at all, because suppressing your thoughts actually makes it worse. Performing compulsions makes your thoughts worse, because you can kind of see it as a graph. Like every time that you have an obsession, obviously it causes your anxiety rise, and then after you do a compulsion or you suppress the thought, then your anxiety decreases. But then when it comes back, like it comes back a lot higher, like your obsessions, and then the anxiety that comes with it. And then you'll do another compulsion, next time it'll become higher and higher again, and that's just an unsustainable cycle. But if you learn to tolerate how uncomfortable your intrusive thoughts are, then eventually, yes, your anxiety will rise like slowly, but ultimately it's going to fall. And the key is just tolerating those thoughts, no matter how uncomfortable they are. Works with anxiety, I guess, just not to suppress your anxiety, not to suppress your depression. And whenever you're having like those uncomfortable thoughts, just to, like for me, like I just tell myself 5 times, like, I accept that I'm anxious. 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 And that really works for me, because again, it's acceptance, not suppression. General mental health tips, I guess, is just never to feel bad for not doing your best, because there is no such concept as like doing your best, or like you always have to give your 100%. I used to think that like I wasn't giving my 100% because I couldn't get like the grades I wanted and everything. But then you have to realize that you're already trying your best, and that is your 100%. That there's no, this whole idea of giving your 100%, your 120% is really just fictional, because everything that you do right now is just to be here and just to manage whatever you're going through, that is already your 100%. And yeah, to build a solid support system, people you can trust. Your struggles with mental health, there will be people that will accept you. There will be people that won't accept you. There will be people that will find that everything gets too heavy for them to keep being there for you. But it's a process. It's not easy to find a support system, but finding one is really important. And yeah, remembering that recovery isn't linear, remembering that even if you have a bad day or you have a relapse, that doesn't mean that you're not doing well, as you already are. And I guess just not letting anything like discourage you, not thinking that just because you had a bad day, and then being really, really scared that your OCD or anxiety or whatever is going to come back. Like just recognizing it's a bad day and it's not going to be like the end.
Wow, those are some amazing tips. And it's funny, I think a few of them really resonated with me, but I think that there are a lot of tips actually for general mental health that can be applied across the board to students, to adults, to everyone really. And I think, yeah, thank you for sharing those. I think hopefully they'll be useful for some people. I think I might take a few of them. So actually, yeah, we're talking about mental health now, and this is such a big relief to be able to talk about it on a podcast, on a kind of also from the inside video. But why do you still think there's such a stigma around mental health?
I think that stigma comes from ignorance, and ignorance just causes fear or just discrimination. It's like anything else. It's like discrimination by race, discrimination by gender, by sexual orientation, really discriminating someone for their mental health. That's a product of stigma, and that's also a cause of stigma, because you can see stigma as being multifaceted. There's societal stigma, and then there's self-stigma. So the societal stigma is what comes from people's general conceptions about mental health, about people with mental health illness, like people with mental illnesses being crazy, or like those classic media portrayals of people with like borderline personality disorder, which I have, as being like the crazy borderline ex-girlfriend, or like the schizophrenic murderer in the news, or anything like that. Anything like the news just overrepresents people who have a mental illness. And a lot of times, like, I mean, like people who have mental illnesses, most of them are not dangerous, but the news likes to just make drama, and they kind of perpetuate this idea. They just write whatever's a good news story, and that the media in the same way, like any films or TV series that perpetuate those stereotypes about people with mental illness, it's just an exploitation of this whole idea of people who are really suffering. It's not fair to them, and it does really influence how people think about it. And yeah, it's discrimination like anything else. It comes from ignorance. It comes from not knowing what it is. But maybe people would say it's fear. More than fear, I say it's discrimination. It's just unjustified, unfounded. The fact that stigma just comes from someone being different, someone that's a minority essentially, and that's really all it is. The fact that the whole idea of seeing someone as normal and abnormal, and if you deviate from whatever is considered normal, then you're crazy, or that's what causes there to be a label on people with a mental illness as being crazy. Then there's self-stigma when people internalize and accept that label that society gives them. And then self-stigma makes it really hard to seek help. It makes it really hard to open up to people, because they're afraid of what other people will think, because of what society perpetuates. That just causes people to feel guilty about like what they're dealing with, which is not their fault at all. It causes people to feel bad and like everything is their fault, but that's not true. And it's just a combination of the two that constantly feeds this cycle. And yeah, like I'm really glad we're having talks like this, that I've given a lot of talks like this just to talk about it in a normal way, that to show that this isn't something that's abnormal.
No, I think there's the classic scenario of, as a person with a broken arm, they don't feel so guilty asking for help with opening a door or for getting their shopping or something. But someone with a mental health illness, with depression or anxiety, they might feel guilty to ask their friend to help them, even though they're both in some way injured. And I think there's a difference there, and it's changing now. It is getting better, but I don't think it's as good as it could be.
Of course, it's not like comparable. Like you can never say like, oh, like a physical illness is worse than a mental illness, or like vice versa. But everyone has their own struggles, and like it's not fair to invalidate anyone's.
No, I just think that the physical illness has become more obvious now, and people are more willing to help those that they see in physical pain rather than mental pain, and possibly because they can't see it as much.
Yeah, definitely. And like maybe people not expressing it because of the whole self-stigma thing, but I do think like a large part of it is what you just said.
So speaking about mental health, you've been involved in some mental health related interviews. You've mentioned it as well. Do you have any events coming up, or were there any that you've had that you really enjoyed?
So I had an event with like the OCD Action charity, and that's the largest OCD charity in the UK. They invited me to be a guest speaker for their week of action, and that's basically a week to raise awareness, 5 days from Monday to Friday. That was in February, about OCD. So each day I would I filmed the video, just like talking about different prompts they had for OCD. And yeah, like I've posted that on like my own blog. They will apparently publish it on YouTube and their website, but they haven't done that yet. And yeah, so I also did a podcast with Pave Multimedia called Real People Honest Talks, and I talked about like not only OCD there, but also depression, anxiety, borderline personality disorder, like bipolar, like everything I have, which is quite a lot. But yeah, in the future, I think that there are a few podcasts coming up. Something's lined up, what I've got so far, and then there's this one.
And finally, how can our listeners to Alter from the Inside find you on social media and start following your blog and your posts and your Instagram interviews?
Oh, it's really easy. It's just 5 letters on Instagram. My username is OCDXO, so it's like OCD and then XO. But I really like try to post there every day. Like some days I'll make like 6 or 7 posts if I just have the time, but I try to make a post there every day, just to have something going. And yeah, like it's hard sometimes to find content to post, but like I really try my best to post about everything. There's old posts, new posts. There's like really a lot of things on there. So yeah, definitely, if you go check it out, you'll see something about like virtually any mental illness, and yeah, lots more coming.
I mean, I'm a follower. I enjoy everything on your channel, so I can't recommend it enough. OCDXO on Instagram. So yeah, definitely do join that channel.
OCDXO.
Okay, unfortunately, that's all we have time for. We have actually talked a lot about really interesting stuff about mental health. I hope we've broken down some of that stigma surrounding it. Thank you for sharing your experience with us, and thank you for the followers for listening to this podcast or watching this video. Remember to follow us at Octa from the Inside on Instagram, and check out our Facebook page for regular updates on new content. I hope you will stay well and safe and have a good Easter, and goodbye.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for listening, everyone.